What's up, troglodytes? Old Sammy G here with my reverse flying V, and trust me, I'm fully aware that despite its beauty and charm, this guitar is not universally loved, but hey, not everyone loves ham and pineapple pizza, so clearly there are people out there devoid of any semblance of taste for the finer things in life.
That's right, it's time for the re-review of the Reverse Flying V, an infamous guitar that's probably one of Gibson's best offerings. And I knew I had to incorporate Samurai Guitarist when I did this because he is like the coolest guy you know that rocks out with one of these things. So there's a lot of misinformation about these guitars out there online, and I want to use this episode to kind of help clear the air, to teach you about why these things are awesome, and how many they actually made. So this quirky model was birthed during the Gibson Guitar of the Week series. If you need to learn about this, check out this episode. I taught you all about every single one. And this one was number 29 out of that entire series, and it caught the world by storm. Naturally, it's one of the most well-known ones of that series simply because it's pretty insane. These were not all that expensive when they were brand new. I think MSRP was somewhere around $1,500 USD, but the street price could be as low as $1,000. So being able to get a quirky Gibson guitar for such a price that is a string-through Flying V, which is normally only reserved for the Carina style ones, it kind of seemed like a no-brainer, even if it is just a kind of strange mouse pointer arrow thing. But as with all the Guitar of the Week series guitars, they made a maximum of 400 of each, and these things sold out relatively quickly. So quickly that Gibson decided, hey, instead of 400, let's do another run. And this is where people get really confused, because the second run of these actually had 3 different colors. The initial run was done up in trans amber finish, even though it just looks like a natural. So they followed this up with an ebony finish, a beautiful white and natural. Now sometimes the natural will vary from example to example, like some of them are darker simply because the mahogany that was used for these particular guitars was darker. So yes, there are indeed 4 different finishes. 2 of them just look very similar. I mean, here you can see a photo of them side by side, and then you start to notice it, but just looking online in photos, even I didn't know they were different until making this video. However, the price was not the same the second time. You can actually look up old controversial upset people who bought the original run on old guitar forums that Gibson reissued something that they thought was 100% unique, so they bought it up, but then they're just gonna keep making them? No, they only ended up making about 300 of each of the other colors. But to try to smooth things over, the other ones were not as cheap as the first run. They were almost double the price. I couldn't find any 100% trustable information online. However, it's been rumored to be about twice as much. So what are the differences between the runs? Is it just the colors? I mean, how do you tell the natural ones apart? That can be very difficult. Do you just look at your serial number and go, oh, it's from 2007, so it must be the Guitar of the Week run? No, that's not true. Honestly, it's kind of difficult to tell, but I'm going to show you. If you're a Guitar of the Week collector like I am and you want to get the right one, you need to look at your headstock. You see that? This is not special at all, it's just a regular truss rod cover. The second run is arguably a cooler spec guitar because they get this brass truss rod cover, so it makes it a little bit more unique. However, somebody nefarious that wants to make theirs a Guitar of the Week, they could technically swap that around. But here's the second spec that actually makes them cooler in my opinion. The second run, it doesn't matter if it's white or black or natural, they will have the ebony fretboard, whereas the original run will have rosewood. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell the difference between ebony and rosewood on these because you might find like a streaky example or something. Now there's also rumors that the second run kind of started to swap pickups during production. However, there's just not enough concrete information out there for me to confirm or deny that. But the original Guitar of the Weeks do in fact have 57 classics. One day I'll get the other ones and then we'll have to figure that out. So there were 400 Guitar of the Weeks, 300 of each of the other colors. Now how much is one of these things going to run you today? Generally between $1,500 to $2,500. It just varies depending on what kind of modifications were made, what kind of condition it is in. But if you're watching this video 3 years later on, you can always book a private help session and I can do a current market evaluation for you. So now that we know the history of this model, let's go ahead and learn his story of the model.
Anyways, I got this guitar when it was first released. It's one of the original 400. I was working in a guitar store and we got the catalog for the Gibson Guitars of the Week. I was flipping through it and instantly, upon first glance, this magnificent creature was calling my name. It just so happened that the store had already ordered one, so I bought this guitar before it even arrived, which made some of the other employees not so happy, because when they found out that we were going to get one in stock, they wanted it too, but you know what they always say, the early bird gets the guitar that's shaped like an arrow. I considered selling it a few times when they skyrocketed in value and I was hurting for cash, but ultimately I've hung on to it through thick and thin, and I'm glad I did. This is the guitar that launched my interest in unique and strange six strings.
And if all that is not enough to make you love this thing, an endorsement from Trogly and Sammy G, how about this? Did you know the origin story actually dates 27 years before it came a thing in the Judas Priest Breaking the Law music video? As that medallion flying V is absolutely destroying that place, you can see the security guard pull out a guitar that looks exactly like the V. So is this a tribute to that? Maybe. I've never heard anything official. Maybe Henry J just didn't want to pay royalties to Judas Priest, but there's got to be some sort of an influence there. But we're not done yet. We need to throw this thing on the workbench to take a look at its parts and specs, and then we'll actually talk about what makes these such underrated guitars. That's right, I'm zooming in on the neck pickup for a reason. Before we dive into this beautiful monstrosity, the week leading up to Halloween, I'm sorry guys, I was kind of slacking on Spooky Guitars month, so I'm going to do my best to give you a review and demo every single day up until Halloween, with the only caveat being the usual Sunday mod collection demo shop. Unless they don't have anything particularly spooky this week, then we'll just move it to the following Tuesday. So be sure to tune in around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. Okay, so the whole secret behind the reverse flying V is the neck pickup. It is surrounded by so much wood, it changes the tones. At least that's what people say. I've had these before, and I do have to say the neck pickups are heavenly on this for like jazz tones. So we'll demonstrate that a little bit later on, but that's what Sammy G was demoing on, was his neck pickup. And on top of that, even though this would look kind of uncomfortable to stand with, sitting and playing with these is a fantastic experience. So we'll do that a little bit today too. But for the original Guitar of the Week run, here is what you should see. You have a 57 classic neck humbucker with a long neck tenon that has a TA standing for trans amber finish. You can clearly see that the mahogany wood that they used to make these is a much more cherry and rich brown color. And here you can see the maple wood capping off the truss rod route. Then your bridge pickup is also a 57 classic, not a plus, meaning not a plus model. It's still a good pickup, but it's labeled DSRV, probably standing for reverse V. Not quite sure what those two are, but that is a really interesting sight. It's almost like they put a different wooden veneer over top, but no, it's just the color. You can see some of that trans amber finish right here and a little bit more of a concentrated section. The other thing that kind of makes these things unique is the fact that they have stock gold hardware. You don't find that on too many Flying Vs. But the bridge pickup reads 7.81 k ohms within the circuit, the neck is 7.85, and the middle, just for fun, 4-ish. Now this is where things get interesting, the pick guard layout. So stock from the factory, you've got a 3-way toggle switch up here, which is kind of a strange place, but you know, it's similar to where an Explorer's would be, just a little bit farther. And then you get one volume control, no tones, anything like that. That's one of the biggest features outside of the body shape that people don't like about the reverse flying V. But let me tell you, there's actually a little bit of room underneath these guys that you can put additional controls here. Here's an example of one that Chicago Music Exchange sold a long time back, where they put additional controls, because you don't really want it right here because that's where you're strumming, even though that's where you have all your room, but you do have this little channel strip right here where you could put some additional controls, or maybe even put like some slider switches if you wanted to even more lower profile. If you buy one of these to actually play and gig it out, there are options if you need something else. The routes are actually surprisingly clean for this era of Gibson. Mainly what you're seeing along here is old buffing compound that they didn't bother removing. Here you can see the natural color of the mahogany again. But there's your toggle switch, there's your one Gibson branded pot. And it looks like they've got your typical ground wire coming from your bridge stud. Speaking of your bridge, it's just your regular Nashville style one, PW branded on the side. Now, I was telling you earlier how to get a string-through Flying V at Gibson USA pricing, they just don't do that hardly ever. Like, there's a few limited edition runs where you can, but this is by far the cheapest string-through Flying V within Gibson's lineup. So normally they're mounted like this. This one gets mounted in the opposite orientation to match the body. But the other thing I found fascinating is the Carina-style ones, they don't actually have a screw that puts it to the body. Well, I don't want to say that because I don't know for sure, but they generally have a metal topper over it, so you can't actually just remove it as easy as a screw anyway. But this version is screwed. So it's one of those features, once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. But just in case you're curious, no, this is not Samurai's reverse Flying V. This one actually came from a viewer of the show. He was looking to sell it. He cut me a pretty alright price, so I could actually add this one to my personal collection. It will not be for sale. I want a complete set of all of these, but moving on to the neck, here's what I'm talking about. If I just took a far shot like this, you might think that's an ebony fretboard. It's a dark rosewood. And then I was also telling you earlier how sometimes you find streaky ebonies. But if you get up really close, you should find a rosewood if you're Guitar of the Week, and an ebony if you're the other one. So I'd be curious, what are your guys' thoughts and opinions on that? Would you want the rosewood because it's more historically spec'd, or would you like the ebony because it's a little bit rarer to find that on a Gibson USA product? After about 2011 anyways. But you've got 22 medium jumbo frets, standard 24 3/4 inch scale length, with a pretty wide 1.72 inch nut width that increases to 2.11 by the 12. Wow. With a first fret neck depth pretty skinny at 0.85, and then stays thin at 0.89. Here's that neck profile at the 1st and 12th fret. Starts off a little bit more rounded, but then gets really wide and loses a little bit of the roundedness, but definitely stays a C shape. And in fact, when you're playing this, the neck feels smaller than normal, probably because the body's sticking all the way up to the 12th fret. So it kind of feels like a short-scaled guitar. It really makes you want to focus in this area, I find, in my playing. And now our headstock. They kind of tried to match the whole reverse Flying V shape by using what they used on the modern style guitars. Well, at least some moderns have it. I mean, there's varying headstocks of what's correct on a modern, but this is one of them. And it's one of my least favorite Gibson headstock shapes. I mean, if you thought a regular Les Paul was pretty bad with your string angles going in here, these ones aren't the best, but you know, it is what it is. You can see our truss rod right here, and the Guitar of the Week style truss rod cover, which is just your regular one. So it kind of begs the question, which is the more desirable version of these if you're only going to buy one? I would argue it's the Guitar of the Week version because it's the one that made it exist. It was the first iteration, first issue. That's usually what collectors want. And if you like these things, the Guitar of the Month birthed the Reverse Explorer. I haven't had one yet, so I don't want to say anything, but they just don't look very practical. But maybe it's like this thing. This doesn't look practical either, but once you play it, you'll love them. Here it is with the strings on again, so you can just see exactly what I'm talking about here. This is such an extreme angle, I had to run the string through it just to get it to stay put. I couldn't actually tune it up to pitch without it falling off. Now the G string was okay, but yeah, definitely not the best Gibson headstock design ever. And now we move on to the backside. There's actually a factory error on this one. We've got a gold ferrule, then a chrome one. Now you could say that the gold plating wore off. And I guess that's a possibility, but this thing wasn't really played. It's in pretty much mint condition except for a very tiny lacquer ding right here on the edge of the headstock. So I believe that to be a goof up. But it is a two-piece mahogany body. These are not Carina like the Carina string through Vs, so kind of makes them interesting in that aspect as well. But you can see the center seam line right here, and then pretty nice wood grain overall. Get a little bit of extra character there, then just a lot of straight grain. Your output jack is located on the side there. Then what a lovely place for your strap button right at the point. And then the other one is like right here. A lot of times you'll see people ruin their guitars and put it right here. And if you're a player, you might prefer your strap to be a little bit more out of your way. But moving up the back of the neck here, it's in beautiful condition. Not too much to talk about here until we get to our backside of our headstock. So, serial number dates this one to the 304th day of 2007, the initial batch, 335th in production. Now, that doesn't mean this was 335 made out of the 400 original Guitar of the Week ones. That's just a production number of all guitars made on that particular day. Then you can see these do indeed utilize a wing system, just like all the rest of Gibson's guitars, to create the sides of the headstock. You can see the different pieces of wood joining in there. It's the Clusen style Gibson Deluxe tuners. All said and done, this one is 6 pounds, 10.5 ounces. Let's go ahead and get some basic tone samples from me, since Sammy G's already shown us how good it can sound when professionally played.
Alright, that gives you a little bit of a playful taste of the tones, but let's just talk about this sitting with it. It's gonna take a little bit to get used to, but if you get a really nice resonant example, it just vibrates against your chest. Sadly, this is a bit of a dud of an example. I don't get quite too much of that, but really, find one that's a fantastic one and you'll enjoy it. I will say it does take a little bit to find out where you should be positioning your arm, because I mean, down here is pretty comfortable, but you kind of have to be picking over the neck right here to kind of get into a normal position. You could also do it like this if you really wanted to, how you normally sit with a Flying V, but you definitely want to have a strap on this thing, because sadly, these do not have the rubber grippers on the edges, which only would have made these things infinitely cooler had they would have did that like the original Carinas. But listen to that neck pickup. Now I'm back in standard tuning. Let's hear some more traditional sounding guitar stuff. So that was the bridge pickup. It's pretty much just like normal. But now listen to the neck. Got a nice bluesy, jazzy sound. Now our middle position. But there is some truth that all this wood around the neck pickup affects it, because I noticed this really just starts to punch my amp out, like when I'm in the lower registers. Now let's kick on some distortion and stand up. So is it comfortable to stand with? Not really. It's not necessarily neck heavy, but it definitely rests just a little bit lower than you're used to. So you could raise your strap a little bit to help kind of compensate for that. But I can see why a lot of people move the strap buttons on these to back here, because that would naturally put it in your correct position here and still hold it up all right. So I understand why people do that, because you'd probably have to put strap locks on this otherwise, because this holds at such an angle your strap is just gonna fall off naturally. And when I said this feels like playing a short scale guitar, it truly does, because for whatever reason, my mind, I don't normally play up here, but it is just completely blocked off, because it's like, that's where the body meets the neck. I shouldn't be playing past that. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. You just kind of have to angle it a different way. So there we have it. We know all about the reverse flying V now. Now, if I'm being honest here, I liked this guitar a lot better the first time I owned it in the white version with the ebony fretboard, because having the ebony board with the cool non-traditional finish on a flying V, just being all upside down and everything, was a lot of fun.
And some of it might have been, this is like a mint condition example. I want to keep it that way. I didn't really want to start hammering in on this guitar, and I used a really thin pick. So maybe that's also another reason why I preferred my last one.
I think a lot of it came down to what type of chair I was sitting on last time as well. But I did find this one a little bit uncomfortable to support while standing. But if you can like sit back in a couch or something, these are a lot of fun. And if you can find an example that has a really resonant wood to it, you know, some guitars, you strum them and you can feel them vibrate. Other ones, they're just kind of dead. That all depends on the lumber. This one, maybe not the best in that aspect. But I will still stand by that the neck pickup on these things is different. Now, different good, different bad. In my opinion, it's different good. You could definitely use this in certain situations, like in the recording studio. However, it might not be to everyone's tastes. So if you've tried one of these in the past and you didn't like it, keep trying them until you find a good one would be my main suggestion. I really hope that one day Gibson reissues these, however they have the regular, like 80s style flying V headstock to them. I know that doesn't match the whole theme of this, but I think a more regular standard style headstock on this would be a lot of fun. Or we can get absolutely insane and put a Firebird headstock on it. So anyways, big thank you to Samurai Guitarist for collaborating on this episode. I knew the next time I got one of these in, I needed to reach out to him, because as far as YouTube guys go, he's the one that has paved the way for people loving these obnoxiously weird, strange guitars. All right, hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.